Hi, and welcome to Hypothetically Intentional, where we ask the question, what if we set intentions with everything we do? Today, we are on a road trip, so the sound is going to be a little different than usual. But I'm road tripping with a special guest today, whose name is Spoons. Welcome, Spoons.
Hello.
I think we have to start with talking about your name, Spoons.
Okay. Yeah.
How did you get, clearly that's not your name. I know this because I've known you for a while now. How did you get the name Spoons?
Okay, well, so I started kind of going by it when I was into gaming. And so I did some online gaming, and we had this thing where we would meet every day. And people would be like, bring your swords, bring whatever weapons, and here I am. I'm just like, let's all bring our spoons. And it just sort of stuck. So it's a fun little silly name.
I love it. It's a cute name.
Yeah.
And then when you hear the story behind it, I feel like it adds so many layers. For someone like me who likes to like explode the thinking out into the creativity piece of it. But I think I'm going to set an intention before we get too much further into it, because I think we're going to talk about road tripping and what those experiences are like. And I think my intention is to learn a new perspective through the eyes of my friend Spoons, because I know that we have different perspectives on travel. Well, everybody does. Travel is such a unique personal experience that I'm fine that Jake and I talked about travel, Andrew and I have talked about travel, and I think travel just opens so many doors. I love learning how other people experience travel. So that's my intention for today.
Sounds like a good one.
So we are actually road tripping from northern Minnesota to Duluth, where we're going to do a little pit stop at Lake Superior, maybe dip our toes in. Spoons road tripped all the way from Tennessee to Minnesota.
Yes.
How did that experience go?
It was really good. I actually did a 2-day travel, so I stopped in Illinois for a bit, and then close to St. Louis, and then came on over to Minneapolis the next day. So it's been fun. You know, you get to see a lot of the different parts of the country, and for me, I hadn't been up through the Midwest this way before, so it's been fun.
I find that when I travel, I think one of the things I notice there's two things I notice first how I know I'm in a different place, right? Like not home. And for me, it's trees and it's going to sound weird, but doors, like architecture, where it's like, it feels kind of like home because the trees are similar, but yes. I can tell it's not home because the trees are different. Mm-hmm. Do you have things that kind of make you realize, or things that pop out at you when you because you're a road tripper, not a flyer, right?
Yes. I mean, I have flown, but it's not my preference by any stretch of the imagination. So what I'm finding traveling here is it looks very much similar to home, except it's just flatter.
Yeah.
So, you know, the trees and things are very similar. So yeah, it has that home away from home kind of vibe. So it feels like you're not too far away.
That's so cool. I find that with travel, like some places I go through and I'm like, I don't know maybe it's not fair to say it's a no, but there's definitely places where I'm like, I just don't feel called to like come here again. And then there's other places, even if they don't feel like home from an aesthetic point of view, or even the culturally, right? Like I can still recognize that this still somehow feels like another home away from home.
Yeah.
And those are the places that I find myself bouncing back to. I used to be in a place where it was like, I don't want to visit the same place twice because I just want to see as much of the world as possible. But there's just a couple in my wheelhouse where I'm just like, yeah, I have to go back.
Yeah.
I have to go back because I miss it when I don't.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a lot of my early life. I just kind of traveled to the same places for vacations over and over, which was fine. But the last several years, I've just been trying to go and explore more of the U.S. So that's been fun. And adding in the Airbnb stays, that's been really helpful to me. I really enjoyed that piece. Just kind of getting to find a place to situate in, and it's, you know, a little more cozy than a hotel. And you never know what that experience is going to be. So I haven't had any bad experiences with that.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
In fact, that's how we met. You,
Yeah.
we ended up in an Airbnb in Sedona.
Yeah.
And we had never met before. There was a small group of us that had met online. And I still giggle about that because old me, like me pre doing any sort of personal development work, would have never said yes to going to stay in a remote location with a group of people that I had never met. I would have been terrified of that.
Right.
But for some reason I said yes. And I know it's because I met you and other people in the group that I just really deeply connect with. And it was such a fun trip, but it was definitely a leaning into fear for me.
Yeah.
Where I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm doing this. Like, to the point where I was like, you know, telling my partner, like, hey, this is where I'm going to be if I don't check in with you, you know, like, which is just ridiculous. The stories we make up in our head when we do things that scare us.
Yeah.
But I think travel, that's one of the things I love about it, is it challenges us to surrender to the flow of whatever may or may not happen, you know?
Yeah, and specifically with that situation where you're meeting with people that you haven't ever met in real life before, which I had the opportunity to meet a couple of them beforehand, so that made me feel a little more at ease, I guess. But, you know, you have to be more considerate, because there was a lot of varying personalities in that, and likes and dislikes, and so, I don't know, it was good. It was an interesting way to kind of take some other things into perspective and consider them. Like, dietary things, for one.
Yeah.
That's a big one. So, yeah, it's just good. And I don't know, it's almost like meeting old friends for the first time, you know?
That's cool. I love that perspective.
Yeah.
Meeting old friends for the first time. Because it did feel like we had known each other.
Yeah.
Even though, like, we had, like I said, I mean, we had talked online, but it just, yeah. And then I think back to, like, I mean, I grew up in the 70s. So, like, meeting somebody in that way wouldn't even have been an option. Right. So it was so much more, maybe restrictive isn't the right word, but it felt more, like you had to try harder to expand. Mm-hmm. Whereas now I feel like that expansion is available to us if we choose to lean into it. Yeah. And travel, road trips is one of those ways. I just think about, like, you road tripping with Myrtle, your
my motorhome.
Your motorhome.
Yes.
Like, I just think, my gosh, you and I are very different in the road tripping thing, as far as, like, I love to road trip, but I get sleepy when I drive. Mm-hmm. So I definitely need people with me.
Right.
And I don't know, I mean, but I'm also a person who likes to drive through as far as possible. So I am a person who would prefer to do it in 2 days versus 4 days, you know?
Right.
Take the longer trips and only stop, you know, occasionally. Mm-hmm. But I can't drive that much if I'm by myself. I need somebody to keep me awake and, you know, so we can entertain each other. And
yeah, I mean, like, I think one day I drove 7 hours, and the other day I drove somewhere around 9 or maybe closer to 10. So, and that's by myself, but I enjoy it.
Yeah.
So it gives me time to, you know, catch up on podcasts or maybe listen to a new book. Or whatever, you know, whatever I'm into that particular week.
That's how I feel about, like, when we do the long trips over to Thailand. It's like I like to catch up on, audiobooks or podcasts, because those plane rides are just so long. Yeah. But I like that the plane, like, for me, the plane ride means I get to see a place farther away. Right. Like, it's further out, so I can explore places that I wouldn't otherwise be able to, like. Yeah. With a road trip.
Yeah. I think I just like having the option to stop at any point.
Yeah. Yeah.
I really do that with the plane.
No. Well, and I do like your perspective of how you can see more of, you can just see more of the country. Yeah. In the driving. Yeah. So. Yeah. And it's really interesting. Like, the first place I stayed on this trip, we were out in the middle of a cornfield on one side of me, and I think a wheat field on the other side. And it's just like, we're out there, but it was cozy. It was a great little spot.
And you want to talk about a place you could just find a little bit of peace and quiet. That's it.
Do you find that when you road trip, if you're not listening to audiobooks or podcasts, you kind of go inward and reflect? Or are you more externally enjoying the view and sort of, I don't know, like I find I explore in my mind, like I wonder how the people here really live. If I don't stop, then I don't really get a chance to talk to people and explore that a little. So I find myself kind of creating the what ifs or what was that like, or even like going back in time. I like to do that too, thinking about like, I wonder what this would have been like in the 1800s, you know, or I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know. I'm not sure.
No, that's all right. It was just like when you, because you like to do the road trip thing, which means, you know, you've talked about exploring, seeing more of the country.
I do have this interesting thing that the last couple of years, I end up stopping at a Cracker Barrel. Don't ask me why it's Cracker Barrel.
They do seem to be on road trips.
But I usually have some of the most interesting conversations in the line, either waiting to be seated or waiting to check out or whatever. I don't know. It's kind of like you get to check in with the people in that town and kind of see. But there's always some similarities, no matter how far from home I get.
Oh, yeah, that's cool.
It's really interesting.
Yeah, there's only so many kinds of people, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't matter where you go. We're not so different. I think that's what I learned the more, like the older I get and the more I do personal development work with myself and with other people, I realize like we're really just not that different, which is comforting and a little like, I don't know. The word conundrum came in. Like, it's a bit of a conundrum for me. Like, I think, how can we not be different? We're all so unique. But then when you really get down and start chatting with people, you're like, we all have similar problems, right? Or similar joys, or just, I don't know. It's fascinating to me to witness people. Now, when you came to Minnesota, you said that, I guess I got the impression, and maybe I'm wrong. You can correct me if I'm wrong. That like when you were traveling up, there were other places like that commented on your accent. Like that was a normal occurrence. And when you got to Minnesota, like it was maybe one person that commented since you've been here?
Yeah, maybe twice in the week I've been here. Someone's commented on my accent or asked me to say something, which I don't ever mind. I always find it interesting. As well, a couple of years ago, traveling up the East Coast, I got it a ton. They just love the accent. I'm like, it's just how I talk.
Yeah.
But I'll continue to talk if you're enjoying it.
Yeah. That's so funny.
But yeah, that was something I noticed about up here. Is like there's just, I don't know if there's more people, different types of people closer to the city, and so maybe they're not noticing it as much, or I'm not sure what it was. It was interesting, though.
It is interesting, and I feel like depends on the type of person, too, right? Like, I'm not a person who would probably ask you where you're from based on your accent, or ask you, I just am not that person. I just think, I don't know, maybe I'm a little shy on that level, on some level, and then there's other people who are just like, they just want to engage and learn more about you and figure out if they can't place the accent, figure out where you're from and all of that. I don't know. I think that's interesting because I'm not usually a person who will engage in conversation that way with a perfect stranger. I'm just not that human.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the girls that asked me about it had recently been to Tennessee.
Oh, so you sounded familiar to her.
She kind of picked up on the accent. She's like, okay. I think I know where you're from.
That's so interesting.
And then I had, we went to that little ice cream shop and the lady thought I was a local, which just cracked me up. I was like, okay, I'll take it.
Yeah. You've been here for 3 days. You already sound like a Minnesotan.
I guess. We'll roll with it.
You adapt to your environment well.
I try.
And I don't even think you have to sound like a Minnesotan to be adapted or accepted into an environment. I just think it's funny. Yeah. I have a cousin who does that. Like when she's around people that have a different accent or even intonation than her. She sort of just like morphs right into whatever group she's in.
Yes.
And I think it just sort of happens naturally. She's not trying to do it. It's just like how she... It's just how she shows up in the world.
Yeah, it's not funny. A mimic, but yeah.
No.
But it's just like the ear. It just picks it up.
Yeah, and then she just like drops right in. And I'm like, I try and do that, and I sound like just completely... like, it doesn't work at all. I can't do accents well unless I'm really immersed for a long period of time. Mm-hmm. And then I do that same thing where you just sort of pick it up and you kind of morph into where you are or whatever. But I don't know. I find traveling fascinating. I think, again, language, how people speak in various areas is also fascinating. And then just seeing the country. Oh, our GPS is telling us something. Or maybe it's your cruise. I don't know.
It's my sensor. I'm sensor driving since we're going so slow.
Yeah, we've hit the construction part of the road trip. You never know what you're going to hit when you travel like this too, right? Like you never know if it's going to be construction or traffic or, who knows, animals.
Yes.
And sometimes it's animals. We've seen a few deer on this trip. Thankfully, they haven't crossed the road in front of us, but that's another thing. I don't know. I just think there's so many different things when we travel that are similar to or representations of like the development, personal growth and development, right? Like, things come from out of nowhere and they surprise you, and you have to sometimes like navigate that obstacle.
Right.
And when it's a surprise, it's harder than when it's something that you see coming from a long distance off in the,
Yeah.
And then as you do that work, how it ripples, it not only ripples out, but it like ripples in and builds a strength. Because I feel like that experience, even though all the obstacles are different, the experience of navigating an obstacle is a learned skill that helps us, or even like you've road tripped so much, you kind of know, like, Airbnbs are your preference over hotels. You know that you can drive X amount of hours before you're tapped out. And you have like that, you've built a skill set around road tripping. Whereas for me, I'm like, yeah, I think I can do 17 hours in a day. And it's like, what the hell, Michelle? Like, what are you doing?
It's kind of interesting. I think the way I road trip would probably give some people nightmares because I plot a couple of points and I'm like, okay, I know I want to do this, that, and I might book a couple of the stays, but I didn't book the rest of my trip stay until yesterday.
And you need a place to stay tonight.
Yeah. So, I just kind of roll with it.
That's actually my favorite way to travel.
Yeah.
Because I like to have the fluidity of being able to flow if something else comes up or if we want, like we actually extended our stay up north. And now we're like, well, now we have time to navigate our way through Duluth and hit Lake Superior, and who knows where else the wind will blow us. We have a little bit of a time frame, but other than that, like I love. Yeah. I love any kind of a trip where I don't have like a full schedule. Sometimes I've been on trips like in high school, where it's like a whole bunch of students together. And then it's like, okay, at 8:05, we're doing this thing. And then at 10:25, we're doing this thing. And then, we have to catch the tour bus for this other thing. And it's just the entire day is scheduled. And by the time you get back to your room, you're like, dang, I mean, I know I saw a lot, but like, I feel like I didn't really get to just like wander and explore and enjoy it. Yeah.
Yeah. I like to have the flexibility in there. And, you need some time, you have to calculate in some time to rest, too. Yeah. When you're going to drive this far. I mean, I know I have to break it up in certain ways. A lot of people have, like, asked, well, when are you heading back? And I'm like, well, I'm not sure. It depends on how tired I am. Do I need 2 days or do I need 3 days to drive back? So, just playing it by ear always.
Yeah. I feel like that's another good skill to help with, like, when life kind of comes at us, to be able to just play it by ear, take it one step at a time, and know when you need to rest.
Yes.
Like, that's so huge.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm very good at that with road trips, I'm not going to lie. Because I just want to get there.
Yeah.
And especially if, like, the drive there, if there's really nothing that is exciting to me.
Yeah.
Then I'm like, well, let's just power through this so that we can get to a place that I actually want to explore versus, like, whatever, boredom is happening over here for me.
Oh, man.
Which is just a little bit funny to me.
It would have been interesting to have gotten you to have traveled across country with us in the motorhome, I think. I don't know if you would have loved it or hated it, but...
I'm pretty good about going with the flow when I'm not the one who's, like, in charge of making the choices, But when I'm the one, like, okay, if I'm going from point A to point B and I'm super excited about getting to point B, I'm going to want to make that happen as quickly as possible, which is maybe not best for most people.
The quickly as possible on the cross country from... We started out in Alabama and went all the way to Sedona, so yeah, that was not... I don't even remember how long that took.
Well, I feel like there would be a lot I would want to see along the way there, and then comes... So for me, what usually ends up happening when I start planning those kinds of things is I don't have enough time that I can get away from my daily life to actually explore all the things I want to. So then I have to pick and choose... I'm like, but I really wanted to see,
Yeah.
There's not time. Because I'm a person who, like, I'll drive 3 hours out of the way to see the other thing. Because I'm already on it. I'm already doing it. Yeah. But that problem is that adds a day or 2 days or 4 days. And it's like, well, hang on. Suddenly I'm taking a 3-week trip that I don't have the capability of with my, with my day job, so to speak. It's like, hang on. But, yeah, it's fascinating. So we're navigating our way through the road construction, which is a
paving project.
Paving project, yeah. So hopefully the sound on this podcast isn't too awful. I'm hoping it works. Oh, speaking of podcasts, I want to do one more thing before we wrap it up, and that is you mentioned podcasts and audiobooks. Do you have like favorites? Like, what are you listening to right now that is exciting?
Well, I think I ended up. We went to a bookshop while we were in town, and I found this book, and it was about lady poisoners. And it was just so interesting looking at. It's kind of like this fairy tale looking book.
It has a beautiful cover.
Yeah, it was really interesting. And then I got to looking at it a little bit more, and it's actually associated with this podcast. And what was the podcast name?
I think was it Criminalia?
Yes.
Is that what it was?
That's what it was. And so we listened to a few of those, and that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, they were cracking me up. They're pretty funny.
Yeah. So, that little bit of dark humor and, I don't know. It was really interesting.
Yeah, that's super cool. So is that a normal podcast vein for you? Kind of like criminal or like...
Well, I love true crime stuff.
Yeah, that's cool.
So I watch a lot of true crime stuff on YouTube. And then, I love fairy tale stuff. I've been listening to Mythos on this trip, which is a Stephen Fry Greek mythology. He's reading Greek mythology.
Oh, that's cool.
So that's what I listen to a lot of on the way up. And so, yeah, it's just fun.
That's cool. I always like to ask people what their favorite podcasts are, or like what they're listening to, because I don't listen to them all the time because I don't have a lot of, like, my trip to and from work isn't that long, unless they're nice little short podcasts, and then that's a different thing.
Yeah.
But then when I travel, like when I come up north, like we are now, right? That's a good 3.5, 4 hour drive. So I love to listen to podcasts, or unless I'm in a music jam, and then that's a whole nother thing. But even that is only for so long for me. And then I'm like, then I want to shift gears into something different. So podcasts and audiobooks. Awesome. Yeah. Well, thanks for joining me today. Is there anything else you want to share with our listeners?
I don't think so. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it was great having you. I appreciate it. All right. Bye. Be you every day. See you next time. Makes me giggle. I wave every time. Like they can see us.
Right?